October 13th, 1958. 8:47 p.m. on a Monday night. A warehouse in Hunts Point, the Bronx, surrounded by empty industrial buildings and loading docks that had gone silent hours earlier. 12 white men sat in a circle under a single bare light bulb, their faces half-shadowed, their voices low but urgent. They'd arrived separately over the past hour, some in work trucks, others in personal vehicles, all parking blocks away to avoid creating a pattern that anyone watching might notice. The leader was a 52-year-old man named Raymond Schuller, a transit police officer who'd been quietly building the largest Klan cell in New York City for the past 3 years. Under his leadership, the Bronx chapter had grown to 87 active members, small compared to southern chapters, but significant for a northern city where the Klan operated in shadows rather than openly. Schuller stood in the center of the circle, spreading a hand-drawn map across an overturned crate. The map showed a single building, 409 Edgecombe Avenue in Harlem's Sugar Hill neighborhood. BumpyJohnson's home. "Gentlemen," Schuller began, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd planned this moment for months. "Tonight we finalize the operation that will change everything. For 3 years, we've watched Bumpy Johnson operate with impunity. A black criminal, living in luxury, doing business with Italians and Jews like he's their equal. The police won't touch him. The politicians protect him. He's become a symbol, proof that our natural order is breaking down." He tapped the map with his finger. "On Saturday, October 18th, at 2 a.m., we execute a coordinated assault on this building. 13 men, 3 objectives: destroy the property, send an unmistakable message, and prove that no one, regardless of their connections, is above our reach." The plan was detailed and brutal. One team would cut power to the block. Another would create a distraction 2 streets away to draw police response. The main assault team, 8 men armed with bats, chains, and Molotov cocktails, would strike the building itself. Windows smashed, fire started, a message left that couldn't be ignored. "We're not trying to kill anyone," Schuller clarified. "We're making a statement. We're showing that wealth and power don't protect you from racial reality. We're proving that Harlem isn't safe, that Johnson's family isn't safe, that everything he's built can be destroyed in one night." Thomas McCardle, a 38-year-old construction worker who'd joined the Klan after his union accepted black members, raised his hand. "What about retaliation? Johnson has an organization. We hit his home, he hits back. That's exactly what we want," Schuller replied with a cold smile. "If he retaliates, we expose him as the violent criminal he is. Media coverage, police crackdowns. Everything he's built collapses under scrutiny. And if he doesn't retaliate, he looks weak. Either way, we win." It was strategic thinking of a sort. Create a situation where any response damaged the target. But what Schuller couldn't know, what none of the 12 men in that warehouse could anticipate, was that their plan had already been compromised. Because standing in the shadows outside that warehouse, invisible in the darkness between 2 loading docks, was a 19-year-old named Michael Romano. He wasn't Klan. He wasn't even sympathetic to their ideology. He was the younger brother of one of Schuller's members, brought along tonight because his brother trusted him, because they needed extra drivers for the upcoming operation. And Michael Romano, who'd grown up in a diverse Bronx neighborhood, who'd played stickball with black kids and Puerto Rican kids and Jewish kids, who'd never bought into his older brother's hatred, had been listening to every word. At 9:23 p.m., while the Klan members continued planning their attack, Michael Romano slipped away from the warehouse. He walked 4 blocks to a payphone. He dropped in a nickel, dialed a number he'd memorized from a business card he'd been given by a neighbor, a black police officer named Sergeant William Hayes, who'd once told Michael, "If you ever see something wrong, something dangerous, you call me, day or night." The phone rang 3 times before Hayes picked up. "Sergeant Hayes," Michael said, his voice shaking slightly. "You said to call if I saw something dangerous. I just heard 12 men planning to attack Bumpy Johnson's home on Saturday night." Firebombs. They're going to burn his building. There was a pause on the line. Then Hayes said 4 words that would set everything in motion. Tell me everything. Slowly, what happened in the next 96 hours, from Monday night to Saturday morning, will become one of the most carefully orchestrated defensive operations in Harlem's history. Not through violence, not through gang warfare, but through intelligence, strategic positioning, and the activation of networks that most people never knew existed. The Klan's plan to attack Bumpy Johnson's home would indeed die before midnight. But not Saturday's midnight. Monday's midnight, less than 4 hours away. Because the moment Michael Romano made that phone call, a countdown began that would end with 13 would-be terrorists facing a choice they'd never anticipated. And the clock was already ticking. To understand how quickly information moved through Harlem in 1958, you need to understand the network that had been built over decades of necessity. By the late 1950s, Harlem was home to over 300,000 African Americans living in approximately 3.5 square miles, one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in America. The civil rights movement was accelerating. Sit-ins had begun in the South. The NAACP's legal campaign was dismantling segregation piece by piece. But progress brought backlash, and backlash brought danger. Harlem had learned to protect itself through information, not through official channels. The NYPD's relationship with the black community was hostile at best, actively conspiratorial with white supremacists at worst, but through informal networks that operated faster than any police radio. Sergeant William Hayes was one of only 31 black officers in the entire NYPD in 1958, assigned to the 28th precinct that covered Central Harlem. He joined the force in 1952 with idealistic notions about serving his community. 6 years later, he'd learned to operate in parallel systems, officially following department protocol while unofficially protecting Harlem through selective information sharing. When Michael Romano's call came in at 9:26 p.m., Hayes didn't report it through official channels. Doing so would have meant filing paperwork that would be seen by corrupt officers, tipping off Klan sympathizers within the department, potentially warning Schuller that his plan was compromised. Instead, Hayes made a different call. To Captain Thomas Morrison, one of only 3 black officers with command authority in the NYPD, a man who'd spent his entire career building quiet alliances across racial and institutional lines. Captain, we have a credible threat. Klan cell planning a firebombing of Bumpy Johnson's residence. Saturday, 2 a.m. I have details. Morrison's response was immediate. Don't file anything officially yet. Meet me in my office in 30 minutes. And call Illinois Gordon. That last instruction was crucial. Illinois Gordon was Bumpy Johnson's top lieutenant, but he was also, in ways the department never officially acknowledged, part of an intelligence-sharing arrangement with certain black officers. When threats arose that police couldn't or wouldn't handle through official channels, information flowed through this back channel. At 10:03 p.m., Hayes, Morrison, and Illinois Gordon sat in Morrison's office at the 28th Precinct, an unusual meeting that would have raised eyebrows if anyone had known about it. A police captain, a sergeant, and a known criminal associate discussing strategy like military commanders. 13 men, Hayes explained, relaying everything Michael Romano had told him. Led by Raymond Schuller. He's transit police, badge number 6847. They're planning to cut power, create a distraction, then hit the building with firebombs. We arrest them now, Morrison said. Preemptive action based on conspiracy to commit arson. Based on what evidence? Illinois Gordon asked quietly. The testimony of one kid who overheard a conversation. No weapons have been purchased yet. No overt actions taken. Any lawyer gets this dismissed in an hour, and then Schuller knows he's being watched. Morrison knew Gordon was right. Without concrete evidence, weapons, materials, documented planning, a preemptive arrest would fail legally and warn the targets. Then we approach this differently, Morrison said. We make it impossible for them to execute their plan. We create circumstances where the attack can't happen without immediate consequences they're not prepared for. Ow! Hayes asked. Illinois Gordon leaned forward. We do what Harlem does best. We activate the network. By Saturday morning, for 09, Edgecombe Avenue becomes the most watched building in New York City. Witnesses everywhere. Police presence that can't be avoided. Media attention if needed. We make their plan operationally impossible. It was the same strategy that had worked on 139th Street the previous year when Klan members had planned to ambush Bumpy's daughter. Don't meet violence with violence. Meet planning with better planning. Meet isolation with community presence. I need to brief Bumpy, Illinois Gordon said. Brief him, Morrison replied. But make sure he understands no preemptive violence. We handle this through positioning, not retaliation. The moment his people start a war, we lose legal and moral authority. Gordon nodded. He'll understand. He's learned that sometimes the smartest move is not moving at all. 11:17 p.m., Monday night. BumpyJohnson sat in his living room at 409 Edgecombe Avenue, listening to Illinois Gordon explain the threat. His wife Mamie was beside him, her face carefully composed, but her hands clenched in her lap. Upstairs, their household was quiet. His daughter Ruthie was at college, but other family members and staff were asleep, unaware that 13 men were planning to burn their home in less than 5 days. 13 men, Bumpy said quietly when Gordon finished. Firebombs. Saturday at 2 a.m. That's the plan, Gordon confirmed. But we know about it. We have time to prepare. Bumpy stood and walked to the window, looking out at Edgecombe Avenue. Quiet at this hour, street lights casting pools of yellow light on the pavement, a peaceful scene that masked the danger gathering. I could end this in one night, Bumpy said. 13 men. We know who leads them. We find Schuller. We eliminate the threat permanently. You could, Gordon agreed. But what happens after? Police investigate a murder. Media covers it. Your arrangement with the Italian families comes under scrutiny. Federal investigators get interested. Everything you've built for 20 years faces exposure. Mamie spoke up, and it doesn't end the ideology. You kill one Klan leader, another one takes his place. You kill 13 men, their organization uses them as martyrs. Violence just feeds the cycle. Bumpy turned to face them. So what's your recommendation? We make their plan impossible to execute, Gordon explained. Captain Morrison is coordinating police presence, unofficial patrols, increased visibility in Sugar Hill. I'm activating our neighborhood network. Witnesses, observers, people who'll be awake and watching Saturday night. We create an environment where any attack gets seen immediately, documented fully, and responded to before it can accomplish anything. And if they adapt, if they change their plan, hit somewhere else, try a different approach, then we adapt too, Gordon replied. But right now, we have something they don't. We know their plan, and they don't know we know. That's an advantage we can't waste through premature action. Bumpy was silent for a long moment, calculating probabilities, weighing options, doing the strategic thinking that had kept him alive and powerful for 3 decades. Finally, he nodded. We do it your way, but I want updates every 6 hours. I want to know where Schuller is, who he's meeting with, any changes to their planning. And I want contingencies if this defensive strategy fails, if they somehow execute the attack anyway. I want immediate response ready. Already working on it, Gordon said. In Illinois, Bumpy added, his voice harder now. Make sure everyone understands. We're being patient, not weak. We're choosing strategy over violence. But if they hurt anyone in this building, if they harm my family or anyone under this roof, patience ends. Completely. It was a line drawn clearly, restraint with limits. Strategic patience with a deadline. The kind of calculated approach that separated BumpyJohnson from less sophisticated criminals. If you're watching this because you're fascinated by how real power operates, not through brute force, but through intelligence, positioning, and strategic patience, hit that subscribe button. This is the history they don't teach in schools, but it shaped how communities survived in impossible circumstances. Over the next 5 days, 2 operations ran simultaneously in New York, one visible, one invisible. The visible operation, Klan preparation. Raymond Schuller and his 12 co-conspirators continued their planning, completely unaware they'd been compromised. They held 2 more meetings, one on Wednesday night to finalize logistics, another on Friday afternoon to distribute assignments and confirm timing. On Thursday, October 16th, 3 Klan members purchased materials at different hardware stores across the Bronx. Glass bottles, gasoline, rags, chains, wooden bats. All legal purchases individually, but together forming the components of their planned attack. On Friday, they conducted a reconnaissance drive through Sugar Hill, observing 409 Edgecombe Avenue from a distance, noting the building's layout, identifying escape routes, timing police patrols to find the gaps in coverage. Everything proceeded exactly as Schuller had planned. He was confident, excited even about the symbolic statement they were about to make. The invisible operation, Harlem's defense. While the Klan prepared their attack, a much larger operation was unfolding around them. Tuesday, October 14th. Illinois Gordon activated what was known in Harlem as the Protection Network, a phone tree that could reach over 200 trusted community members within hours. The message was carefully crafted. Increased vigilance needed in Sugar Hill this weekend, specific attention to 409 Edgecombe Avenue, community presence requested Saturday night into early Sunday morning. Nobody was told about the Klan plot specifically. Operational security required limiting information. But the network understood what increased vigilance meant. Threats existed, protection was needed, and the community would provide it. Wednesday, October 15th. Captain Morrison quietly repositioned patrol schedules for the 28th and 30th precincts. Saturday night into Sunday morning would see increased police presence throughout Sugar Hill, not obviously concentrated around 409 Edgecombe, which would tip off anyone watching, but distributed in a pattern that meant officers would be within 1 minute's response time to that address. He also coordinated with the fire department. Engine Company 37 on 125th Street would have an extra crew on standby Saturday night, positioned to respond immediately to any reports of fire in the Sugar Hill area. Thursday, October 16th. Sergeant Hayes confirmed the identities of all 13 Klan members through Michael Romano's information and independent investigation. Each man was now under informal surveillance. Not constant, which would alert them, but periodic observation that tracked movements and identified patterns. Hayes also confirmed Raymond Schuller's position within the NYPD Transit Police. He quietly documented Schuller's work schedule, his patrol routes, his associations with other officers. If the operation went wrong, if arrest became necessary, Hayes wanted every piece of leverage available. Friday, October 17th. The final pieces fell into place. Building superintendents on Edgecombe Avenue were notified of potential vandalism concerns and asked to maintain heightened awareness. Security at 409 Edgecombe was reinforced, not with armed guards, which would create the wrong image, but with additional staff who could monitor and respond. BumpyJohnson, ever strategic, invited 2 friends to stay the weekend, both women with impeccable social connections, whose presence in the building would create witnesses that even the most reckless attackers would hesitate to harm. And perhaps most critically, word was passed to certain journalists, black reporters at the Amsterdam News, sympathetic writers at other publications, that something significant might happen in Sugar Hill Saturday night. No details, just the suggestion that being in the area with cameras ready might yield a newsworthy story. By Friday evening, less than 24 hours before the planned 2 a.m. attack, for 09, Edgecombe Avenue had become one of the most quietly defended locations in New York City. Not through obvious force, but through layered preparation, community witnesses, police proximity, media readiness, strategic positioning of people who would ensure that any attack became immediately documented and responded to. Raymond Schuller had no idea that his carefully planned assault was about to collide with defensive preparations far more sophisticated than anything he'd anticipated. October 18th, 1958, 1:17 a.m., 43 minutes before the scheduled attack. Raymond Schuller and his 12 Klan members gathered at their staging point, an abandoned gas station on the border between Harlem and the Bronx. They'd arrived in 5 separate vehicles, parking in darkness, distributing weapons and materials with practiced efficiency. The Molotov cocktails were prepared, 6 bottles filled with gasoline, rags stuffed in the necks. The bats and chains were distributed. The team assignments were confirmed. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. "Remember," Schuller told his men, "we move fast." Power cut at 1:55. Distraction at 1:58. Main assault at 2 o'clock. We're in and out in under 3 minutes. Nobody deviates from the plan. At 1:32 a.m., the power cutting team, 2 electricians who knew how to access utility boxes, drove toward the designated location on Edgecombe Avenue, where they disabled the street's electrical supply. They never made it. At 1:34 a.m., their vehicle was pulled over by NYPD patrol car. The 2 officers, neither of them part of Captain Morrison's coordination, just routine patrol responding to a traffic violation, approached the vehicle and immediately noticed tools in the back seat that seemed suspicious at this hour. "License and registration," the officer requested. The electricians complied, trying to stay calm, but their nervousness was obvious. The officers ran the plates, checked the licenses, and made a decision to search the vehicle. Completely legal given the late hour and suspicious circumstances. They found wire cutters, insulated gloves, and a hand-drawn diagram of Edgecombe Avenue's electrical infrastructure. Not enough for arrest on its own, but enough to detain both men for questioning. At 1:41 a.m., the power cutting team was sitting in the back of a patrol car, their part of the operation completely destroyed by random chance, or what Schuller would later believe was random chance, not knowing that increased patrols had created exactly this kind of probability. At 1:47 a.m., Schuller received a payphone call from one of the detained men, who'd been allowed one call and used it to report the situation. "We're detained. Traffic stop. They found the equipment. We can't complete the power cut." Schuller's mind raced. The plan was falling apart, but could they adapt? The assault could proceed without the power cut. It would be riskier, more visible, but still possible. Continue with the main assault, he decided. Modified approach. No power cut, but we still have numbers and surprise. At 1:53 a.m., the main assault team, 8 men in 2 vehicles, began driving toward 409 Edgecombe Avenue. They turned onto the street at 1:56 a.m., and immediately everything was wrong. Edgecombe Avenue wasn't dark and deserted as it should have been at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Lights were on in multiple buildings. People were visible on stoops and in windows. Not many, but enough. At least 15 people, maybe 20, spread along the block at various points. And parked at the corner, barely visible in the shadows, was a police car. Officers inside, clearly awake, clearly watching. "This isn't right," Thomas McCardle said from the passenger seat. "There shouldn't be this many people awake." "It's Saturday night," Schuller replied, but his voice was uncertain now. "Some people stay up late." But it wasn't just Saturday night activity. This was deliberate presence. People who were clearly watching, clearly aware, creating a wall of witnesses that made any attack visible and documented. At 1:58 a.m., the distraction team, positioned 2 blocks away to draw police attention with a staged car accident, executed their part of the plan. They crashed 2 vehicles together at the intersection of 145th Street and Bradhurst Avenue, creating noise and chaos designed to pull patrol cars away from Edgecombe Avenue. But the police car on Edgecombe didn't move, because Captain Morrison's coordination had ensured that specific patrol car had specific instructions. Maintain position on Edgecombe Avenue regardless of calls elsewhere, unless directly ordered to respond by command. At 2 a.m., The exact moment when the assault was supposed to begin, Schuller sat in his vehicle on Edgecombe Avenue, watching the impossible situation unfold. Too many witnesses. Police too close. The element of surprise completely gone. His power-cutting team detained. His carefully orchestrated plan disintegrating minute by minute. "We aboard," he said finally. "Everyone disperses. Different routes. We regroup tomorrow to figure out what went wrong." The vehicles turned around and left Edgecombe Avenue. The Molotov cocktails remained unlit. The assault never happened. The plan had died. Not in violence. Not in confrontation. Just in the quiet collapse of logistics, encountering superior preparation. 2:23 a.m. The immediate threat had passed, but the consequences were just beginning. Illinois Gordon, who'd been watching from a building across the street, made a phone call to BumpyJohnson. They came. They assessed. They left. The defensive positioning worked. They saw too many witnesses, too much police presence, and aborted. "Anyone hurt?" Bumpy asked. "No one. Not a window broken. Not a confrontation. Not a single incident." They just left. There was silence on the line. Then Bumpy said something that surprised Gordon. "Good. That's better than I hoped." "You wanted them to abort?" "I wanted them to fail without anyone dying," Bumpy replied. "Every time violence happens, the community pays the price. Police crackdowns, media attention, federal investigations. But this? They planned an attack, gathered resources, came to execute it, and accomplished nothing. They failed completely, and we didn't have to hurt anyone to make it happen." It was strategic sophistication that went beyond simple victory. Bumpy understood that the best wins were the ones where enemies defeated themselves through their own inadequacy, meeting superior preparation. Over the next week, several things happened that demonstrated the full scope of the victory. Sunday, October 19th. Michael Romano, whose original phone call had compromised the entire operation, was quietly relocated to Philadelphia with $2,000 in cash and a job lined up at a warehouse. Illinois Gordon had arranged everything, protecting the informant while removing him from potential retaliation. Monday, October 20th. The two electricians who'd been detained during the traffic stop were formally charged with possession of burglary tools and intent to commit criminal mischief. Their arrest created a documented legal case that connected them to the broader conspiracy, even though the attack never happened. Tuesday, October 21st. Raymond Schuller was called into internal affairs at NYPD headquarters. Captain Morrison had filed a confidential report, not public, not official enough to trigger union protection, but serious enough to begin an investigation into Schuller's activities and associations. Schuller was suspended pending investigation. Within 6 weeks, he'd resign rather than face departmental charges. Within 6 months, he'd left New York entirely. Wednesday, October 22nd, the New York-Amsterdam News ran a story titled "Community Vigilance Prevents Vandalism in Sugar Hill." The article didn't mention the Klan specifically, but it celebrated how neighborhood awareness and police cooperation had prevented potential property crime through increased weekend patrols and community engagement. Anyone involved understood the real story. But by framing it as general crime prevention rather than specific Klan confrontation, the article avoided creating martyrs or inflaming racial tensions. Thursday, October 23rd. The remaining 11 Klan members who participated in the planning met one final time. The meeting lasted less than 20 minutes. The consensus was clear. Somehow, they'd been compromised. Somehow, Harlem had known they were coming. Somehow, their carefully planned operation had been countered at every level. The group disbanded. Several members quit the Klan entirely. Others drifted away, demoralized by the failure and frightened by how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. By November 1958, the Bronx Klan chapter that Raymond Schuller had built to 87 members had collapsed to fewer than 20 active participants. The failed Edgecombe Avenue operation had demonstrated that in certain neighborhoods, with certain targets, Klan intimidation simply didn't work anymore. The title of this story is KKK planned a night attack on Bumpy Johnson's home. The plan died before midnight. That's precisely what happened on October 13th, 1958. The plan died at 9:26 p.m. on Monday night, the moment Michael Romano made a phone call to Sergeant Hayes. Everything that followed was just the slow-motion collapse of an operation that had already been fatally compromised. But the significance goes deeper than one prevented attack. What happened in October 1958 demonstrated a model of community defense that would be used repeatedly throughout the civil rights movement. Don't meet violence with violence. Don't give aggressors the confrontation they want. Instead, use intelligence, preparation, and strategic positioning to make their plans operationally impossible. This approach had several advantages. Legal protection. No laws were broken in defending 409 Edgecombe Avenue. People simply stayed awake, remained visible, and created a presence on public streets. Completely legal, completely defensible, completely effective. Moral authority. Because the defense was nonviolent and preventative, Harlem retained moral high ground. There were no casualties to exploit, no violence to condemn, no martyrs to create. Sustainable strategy. Unlike violent responses that escalate conflicts, this defensive model could be repeated indefinitely. Each time a threat emerged, the same network could be activated, the same strategies employed. Community empowerment. The operation demonstrated that ordinary people, not just criminals or enforcers, could protect their neighborhood through collective action and strategic thinking. Captain Thomas Morrison, who'd coordinated the police response, was promoted to deputy inspector in 1959. He never publicly acknowledged his role in the Edgecombe Avenue defense, but his career advancement reflected departmental recognition that his approach, interracial cooperation, strategic positioning, preventative action, represented effective policing. Sergeant William Hayes continued serving in Harlem until his retirement in 1976. He became known as one of the most trusted officers in the community, precisely because incidents like the Edgecombe Avenue operation demonstrated that he would use his position to protect residents, even when that meant operating outside official channels. Illinois Gordon remained Bumpy Johnson's top lieutenant until Bumpy's death in 1968. But he also evolved into something more, a community organizer who understood that criminal power and community protection weren't always separate things, that sometimes the networks built for illegal purposes could be repurposed for legitimate community defense. And Michael Romano, the young man whose phone call prevented the attack, lived the rest of his life in Philadelphia. He worked in that warehouse for 32 years, raised a family, and only told his children about the October 1958 incident on his deathbed in 2003. "I heard men planning to burn a building with people inside," he told his daughter. "I made a phone call. That's all. But that phone call mattered. It saved lives. And it taught me that courage isn't about fighting. Sometimes it's just about picking up a phone and doing the right thing." Bumpy Johnson himself rarely spoke about the incident, but those close to him noted a shift in his philosophy after October 1958. He became more willing to use defensive strategies over offensive ones, more interested in preventing conflicts than winning them, more conscious that the smartest victories were the ones where nobody died. When Bumpy passed away in 1968, Illinois Gordon reflected on the Edgecombe Avenue operation in a conversation with a journalist. People remember Bumpy for his power, his toughness, his control of Harlem. But one of his smartest moments was October 1958, when he chose not to act, when he let the community protect itself, when he trusted strategy over violence, when he proved that real power sometimes means knowing when not to use force. The 13 Klan members who planned that attack scattered to different fates. Some left New York. Some quit the Klan. All of them learned that Harlem in 1958 wasn't a place where racial terror could operate with impunity. The neighborhood had evolved beyond fear. It had intelligence networks, defensive strategies, alliances across racial lines within law enforcement, media relationships that could shape narratives, and community bonds that could mobilize hundreds of witnesses within hours. The Klan's plan to burn Bumpy Johnson's home died before midnight on Monday, October 13, 1958, the moment an informant made a phone call that set superior preparation in motion against their plotting. By Saturday at 2 a.m., when they arrived on Edgecombe Avenue expecting darkness and isolation, they found lights and witnesses instead. They found police presence they couldn't avoid and community awareness they couldn't overcome. They found that their carefully planned terror had been met with even more careful preparation. And they learned what Harlem already knew. In a community that refused to be isolated, that shared information faster than conspirators could plan, that activated defensive networks within hours, organized hate had simply become operationally obsolete. The plan died before midnight. The attack never happened. The community was protected. And that victory, quiet, nonviolent, strategic, proved more powerful and more sustainable than any confrontation could have been. That's the real story of October 1958. That's the legacy of the night a Klan attack died before it could begin. That's what happened when hate met intelligence, when violence met strategy, when terror encountered a community that had learned to defend itself through preparation rather than retaliation. 13 men planned an attack. 0 people were hurt. And Harlem proved, once again, that the strongest defense isn't always force. Sometimes it's just being too organized, too prepared, and too unified to intimidate. The plan died. The community survived. And the lesson echoed through decades of civil rights struggle that followed. Strategic preparation defeats violent intimidation every single time.